a former Belleville Bull joining us on the OHL podcast this week. And that's, for people of my age anyway, a little bit strange to say because the Belleville Bulls are no longer in the Ontario Hockey League, but I sure hope they get back. And a recent inductee, too, into the Belleville Sports Hall of Fame, which we'll talk about. Steve Bancroft with us. Great to have you on the show. Thanks a ton for making the time.
Awesome. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it.
So let me get this straight, because basically a hometown boy getting to play for the Belleville Bulls. But is it true what I'm hearing, that you didn't even really want to play for the Bulls, but they picked you in the draft anyway?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I grew up a Bulls fan. I remember watching them, going to the Bulls games with my dad. And then so when things, I actually had to move away to play junior B. So I moved away from home. And then when all the accolades started coming in for the draft, I was actually ranked in the first round. And I went to the draft with a cast. I hurt my knee playing spring hockey. So back then they would just immobilize you. So I had a cast from my ankle right up to my hip heading into the OHL draft. So funny enough, I think I was rated eighth or 10th or something, and I fell to the second round. So leading up to that, my agent was like, "Yeah, maybe it's good. You're okay with moving away from home." I'm like, "Yep, wherever I need to go." Well, maybe we'll tell Belleville not to draft you just because it's so close to home. Maybe you don't need the increased pressure. And I was like, "Yeah, whatever you think." So sure enough, get picked by Belleville, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Okay. So no pressure, hometown team. And how about Larry Mavety as your head coach? No pressure at all there, eh?
Yeah, lots of stories about Mav over the years. Like I said, I stood back in the stands and watched him coach. I watched him actually walk across the rink one time. Somebody was heckling him, and between periods, he walked across the rink, across the ice, taking his jacket off because he was going to come and confront this guy in the stands right in front of me. So yeah, definitely he was a guy that he was a gruff old bugger, but hey, he really looked out for his players and stood up for them, and like total old school hockey, right?
As a player, I'm sure you appreciated that if he's a guy that stood up for his players.
Yes, for sure. Because they say he's well known. He'd been around so long for a reason. But at the same token, he didn't mind you having a little bit of fun. But he liked being in on the fun sometimes too. But he kept an eye on us, made sure we weren't getting in any trouble, and say, look at all the guys that played for him over the years, right?
You talked, Steve, about going to those games at the Yardman, watching the Bulls as a kid. So kind of to allude to what I referenced at the beginning here, no longer at least major junior hockey in Belleville. Does the community miss it? I mean, it was a part of the fabric in the Quinte region, wasn't it?
It was for sure. And like I say, that hardworking mentality that all those teams brought, they were always tough teams. They were enjoyable hockey to watch. The old song they used to play when the goals come on, wasn't that a party? They got rid of that. I think my last year they got rid of that song, but they bring it back out once in a while, so the fans would the fans would all start cheering when that came out, right? So um, it's a sad to see it left. I was when they were talking about it leaving, and it happened quick. I'm not going to lie, I wasn't too happy to see the team leave that quick. If any other team tries to leave, you hear about it for months in advance, and that one kind of happened pretty quick. And I kind of lowered a little bit of the backstory, and that they needed a team in Hamilton to replace a lease that was gone from the Montreal Canadiens. So yeah, I wasn't real happy the way it shook down, but again, what do you do? It happened quick. There was a lot of local people that were trying to put together something to keep the team in town. Whether that ever would have come to fruition, hard to say. Big thing, the rink since then has overgone major transition, major renovations, and kind of funny, going back 5, 6, 7, 8 years before that, it always came up in the local politics. Yep, we're going to plan on redoing the rink, and they shot towards 2017, and kind of sad that it never got done prior to that, because to leave Belleville in the lurch again, they end up getting the Belleville Senators, which again, great brand of hockey. I played it for many years. So it's just a different brand. They say, what's the difference between OHL and AHL? I said, HL, they're professionals. There's not as many mistakes. It's going to be more controlled. The OHL game, there's lots of kids kind of feeling their way through the league, and there's going to be lots of mistakes, which leads to lots of goal scoring opportunities, right? So you're not going to see that as much in pro hockey.
Speaking of that ice surface at the Yardman Arena, obviously, I can only imagine what kind of home ice advantage it was for the Bulls back in the day, because it's Olympic size. Forwards, it's one thing. Goaltenders and defense, it's got to be another. How much of an adjustment was that for you as a defenseman to get used to playing on that ice surface?
Yeah, well, it's definitely the goaltenders are the big thing.
Yeah.
Their angles would be totally off. You'd see them halfway out of the net, and you're like, "What the heck's that guy doing?" But they're so the angles were so much different. Obviously, with the open ice, like it's amazing to try and get hits on that open ice. And like we had a guy, Brian Marchment, there, rest in peace, good, really good friend of mine. How he was able to actually track people down in that open ice, just amazing, because it's a different game. It's a different part of your angling. You're basically trying to push everybody to the outside. You're basically sometimes giving up the blue line to the oncoming rush just to try and keep them out of the middle of the ice, and then wait for your back checkers to get back. But yeah, it's once the game starts, you don't really notice it. More so likely doing sideboards in practice when you got to go over and back.
You mentioned Mush, and rest in peace for sure. The hockey world is, I think, still mourning a sudden loss. You had a cup of coffee with him in Chicago too, in your NHL game you played with the Blackhawks. But what do you remember of him?
I met Mush when I was 17, and hit it off pretty quickly. I live back north of Belleville, half an hour. He had a cottage the next lake over from me. Big into hunting and fishing, so we meshed real quick. Spent a lot of time together. Yeah, even in so Chicago, I got called up, and he ended up being in the doghouse with the coach, and they actually sat him out to play me my first NHL game. And then fast forward years later, I got the opportunity to play with him and Scott Thornton in San Jose, which was a big highlight for me. But yeah, Mush was he was one of a kind, and all the people that came to talk at his celebration of life, like I say, a lot of people that I would know from name only, but to hear some of the stories, and they all kind of came back to the same type of person that Mush was to everybody.
It's been said, Steve, that between you, Marchment, Brian Chapman, and a Kitchener boy, Bigsy, Greg Bignell, you were the best 4D as a top four in Belleville Bulls history. Were you aware of it at the time? I mean, you must have known you were a pretty solid foursome.
Yeah, not at all. Like realistically, Mush and Chappie, that was Chappie's last year. He ended up getting 60 some points as a 19-year-old. Big Z would have been his second year. Myself coming in as a rookie, I didn't likely hit stride till kind of later in the season. I was a second round draft pick, but just like anybody else, if you're not playing well, you're not going to play much. So again, trying to jump in front of some of those veteran guys. It wasn't likely till the end of the year where I started to get comfortable. But I've never heard that. There's been a lot of good D go through the Belleville zone here. So, and I did, like I say, once I retired, I've been retired 18 years. I'd go back and watch some of the teams that George Burdett and Jake Grimes put together there. So they had some pretty formidable D there too.
One goal in your rookie season. Surely you remember it.
Oh, for sure. Slap shot from the point on the ice off somebody's skate.
Just the way you drew it up, right?
Exactly. They don't ask how though, right?
Exactly. What was it like? What was the adjustment like? You had played in St. Catharines the year before, then you stepped into the Ontario Hockey League. We just talked about some of those great D you were surrounded by, but what was the learning curve or the jump like for you, Banger?
It is quite a jump, believe it or not. Like I say, and there's anywhere from 16 to a 20-year-old that you're going to be playing with and against at any one time, right? So it's quite a difference in age. If you were to put like high school sports, put a 16-year-old against a 20-year-old, you're going to notice a big difference. So you kind of got to sit back and see how it goes. I remember like even how physical the game was. Fighting was a lot bigger part of it back then. Like there would have been, I think my first, likely one of my first memories is in one of the first scrimmages and Mush, and there was another guy, Brian Blad. Well, Mush speared him, and I'm sitting on the bench watching, and they're buddies. They played together, and they fight at center ice. They break it up. They fight again, and then Mav has to come down out of the rafters and break it all up, and said that's enough. So I'm sitting there as a rookie and thinking, oh my, like this is going to get intense here right off the hop. So after I remember I wasn't in a fight in training camp, and I said to one of the veterans, I said, geez, really nobody's asked me to fight. Should I just grab somebody and start swinging? And they said, no, don't worry about it. Just wait for the first exhibition game. So that's what I did.
And
I was actually Ian Fraser.
oh my God, Fraz, he's been on this podcast too.
Oh, is that right?
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
Fraz, great guy. Played against him for years. So I had a lot of shoulder problems. That was my the first fight in the OHL. Fought Fraz, and I popped my shoulder out in the middle of the fight. So he caught me with a good one right in the nose. And at the time, they got him into the penalty box, and my shoulder popped back in on the way. So I tried to get at him. He was sticking his head out, making fun of me, and so I tried to jump in the penalty box and get him. And and again, Mav's on the bench, so obviously Mav would have caught notice of that pretty quick, right?
I think we recognize, Steve, that the game the way it was compared to the game the way it is has improved in a lot of ways. I mean, that's got to be pretty damn intimidating as a 16-year-old thinking about that first fight. When's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? How am I going to do, etc. But there are elements I still miss from that too. How do you view the eras and kind of where we're at with the game today compared to what it was like when you were playing?
I don't get me wrong. I love the new game. It's so fast. It's so skilled. But I do miss the physicality of it. Not necessarily that it has to be 5 fights a game, but just the physicality of going in, finishing your checks. Drives me crazy to watch guys go in on the forecheck and just swing away. And certain coaches will still preach that to finish your check, but a lot of them don't follow up with it. So that's what I would like to see is the physicality. Like I say, not necessarily that it needs to be fighting. Do I think fighting should be part of the game? Yes, I do. I think it's crazy that Quebec League's trying to take it totally out of the game. No accountability. And again, I wasn't a fighter by any means, but I sure enjoyed having one of them by my side to kind of back me up when I need it.
Yeah, and I was just talking to somebody about that. Like all the stuff you see in scrums these days, after there's a whistle and there's the pushing, the shoving, the face wash, the little slash. And I said that same thing about accountability. If we still had a consequence maybe in the game, everybody wouldn't be so tough in those post-whistle scrums.
Yeah, well, look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. One of their main offseason acquisitions, Reeves. Come in and create something that they haven't had. But again, you can't sit those guys on the bench. You got to at least be able to play and go out and be physical and get your hits and be able to create, whether it's 7-8 minutes of ice a night. But you can't sit on the bench and expect to utilize somebody for 2 minutes a game, right? You're just taking up a spot. So again, there's people that can do that role. A lot of those tough guys that never got a chance, they still had to be able to skate to get to that level, right? So anybody can skate, anybody can finish their check and be a force that way. Not everybody's willing to do it though.
I got to think that being a Belleville Bull back in the day, the biggest rival was about 45 minutes away in Kingston.
Yeah, you could say that.
What would you say about that?
Well, obviously, likely one of my fondest memories in junior was my last year. We played Kingston, and I believe it's still the longest OHL game in history. Playoff game. It was game 4, and it was game 2, and that went 4 overtimes. And that series was just I'd gotten a fight with Tony Yob. He busted my nose. I think it was in game 4. My nose bled for 3 more games. I couldn't get it to stop. But at the end of that 7-game series, we won in game 7 in Kingston and pulled the goalie. We were shorthanded. Remember, clear as day. So we were able to pull that up, but wow, what a series! Looking back at all those guys, how hard everybody battled, and then we got beat out whatever night it was, and that the rinks we were playing Peterborough the next round, and of course that's in the spring. You have the garden shows and the home shows and everything. We end up having to play 4 days in a row after finishing that 7-game series. It was ridiculous. They'd never let it happen again. It's just ridiculous that they made us do it. We were out 4 days later. We were just so drained from that first series. But yeah, especially with Mav going to Kingston too. He left after my first year. So obviously Mav going to Kingston, and it was the Raiders back then. So obviously that was an added element to everything. But after that 7-game series, typical Mav, he calls in all the guys that he drafted that were still there. There was myself and Big Z and Scott Thornton and Bob Berg, Jeff Fife. He called us all into his room and wanted basically just to tell us how proud he was of us, even though he just lost. But like you say, anybody could have won that one.
Man, oh man, that's a great story. And it just speaks to the character of Larry Mavety, doesn't it?
Big time. Like you say, who would have thought? You know, once you're on another team, let them go. But no, I would still see Mav around, even when I was coaching some AAA. Any games we'd go to, he'd sit up at the top there with Dick Cherry. So I always made sure we went and found him.
I, of course, had that playoff series against Kingston on my list of things to talk about because you guys were the underdogs too. It was a 5-2, I'm pretty sure. And you have to win game 7 in their barn to advance.
Yes. Well, Kingston had a wicked regular season. And again, playoffs isn't always about the best regular season team. It's just who's playing the best at the right time. So, yeah, we were definitely underdogs. We were likely closer to the 500, and Kingston had a great year that year. So, going in, especially we lost game 1, won game 2. Game 3, we actually fired our coach. That was Danny Flynn was our coach. And Doc Vaughn decided that after game 3 we were down that we were gonna fire the coach. So our assistant coach took over. So that was even an added element to the whole series. So, and then I think it was after game 4, our goalie Jeff Fife, he threw a stick in the stands, and he was the OHL goalie of the year, all-star, everything, and had a wicked year. But after that game, we didn't get a chance to have him in the nets anymore. So a guy named Rob Stopar come in, wasn't even with us all year. So he came in and actually won the last few games for us.
Man, oh man, like that's a crazy amount of things to happen in a series that you end up ultimately winning as an underdog.
Yeah, it's almost like we should have won the whole darn thing and then come back and look at that, but wasn't meant to be, I guess.
What was your least favorite building to play in on the road, Steve?
We didn't go west very much, right? So we just went one game a year. I wasn't a big fan of that Windsor Arena. I know
that. Why does that one always come up? The fans right on top of you, right? Not an easy place to play.
No, not at all. And again, they were rabid fans too, right? So it just felt like they were right on top of you, hanging right over you, and everybody screaming and yelling at you. But likely that'd be the one that stands out the most.
You mentioned the Toronto Maple Leafs a few moments ago. I would be remiss, and forgive me, I'm sure you're tired of this, but you were part of a really remarkable draft year in '89, one of 3 Belleville Bulls to be taken in the first round by the same team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. You were the third of the 3.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, and I've read a couple books on what exactly happened, and but it was funny because going into the draft, obviously Scott Thornton, he was rated 3rd or 4th, and he ended up going that high. Leading up, I was ranked 10th, but again, I've referenced some shoulder injuries there before. I was just coming off my second shoulder surgery after my second year playing junior, so there was some current concerns about that. I guess among other things. And so I was rated 10th. And so when they picked that 12, Rob Pearson actually played for us that year, and he only played maybe about 30 games. He broke his wrist, so he missed half the year. So again, he was a real gritty player. could score goals with the best of them. So he was ranked later in the draft, but again, he only played half the year. So when they picked that number 12. They'd said, and Toronto Maple Leafs are proud to select from the Belleville Bulls. And I had my whole family down there in Minnesota, and one of them squawked, and then they said Rob Pearson. So, and again, not knowing what to think, knew that they had another one, but not even thinking about getting picked to the Leafs. And there was all the teams leading up to that. And the book that I'd read, so when they ended up picking me, the Stellick, they didn't even realize at the time the history that they were making. They just said we just picked the best player we thought available. So that's how I got picked, and I'm sure they've taken a lot of heat over the years because Adam Foote got picked right after me to Quebec. So
what did he ever do, Banger? What did he ever do? So what was draft day like for you? First of all, obviously not hearing your name when you thought it was, they called out Rob Pearson instead, but what was, going first round to the National Hockey League, to the Toronto Maple Leafs, no less, is something I'm sure you'll always remember.
Yeah, for sure. Like I say, once we got picked, and then we all met up meeting at the draft right there. Like Scott and Rob were still there, and obviously us all being friends was pretty crazy. All the interviews and stuff after, but then we got to spend some time with our families, and then enjoy the festivities in Minneapolis that night. So, but yeah, it's pretty surreal how it all shook down. Liam McGuire, who's a guy that does all the video or the trivia stuff. I was at a function with him years back, and they were saying, ask me anything that, and my question to him was, everybody knows that we all got picked in the first round. And my question to him was, how did the Toronto Maple Leafs end up with 3 first round picks in 1 year? And he thought for a while, and he says, I don't know. He says, you got me. And I said, Toronto traded Ken Reggett to the Flyers for 2 first round picks that year. That's how they ended up with 3. So to have 3 picks, it happens. The Bruins had not long ago, 2015, I think they had 3. But to pick all 3 from the same junior team, I can't see it ever happening again.
Yeah, that was, I had wondered about that same thing. So now I know the piece of trivia too, because it's one thing to say, you were one of 3 picked, but I was wondering, like, how the heck did the Leafs end up with 3 first round picks that year? So there you go.
They were pretty bad, but they only give you 1 for that.
Any chance that the Leafs were your team growing up, or who did you like?
No, they definitely were my team. My dad was a avid Leaf fan. He still is to this day. And I cheer for kind of anybody the Leafs are playing.
Really, eh? You turned your back on the organization, did you?
Well, it wasn't even that. It was never really held any allegiances, and then towards the end of my AHL career, I was playing in Ottawa, and I was playing with Jason Spezza, Chris Kelly, Brian McGrath, and all OHL guys, Antoine Vermette, all these guys, Ray Emery, like all these guys that end up going to onto Ottawa. Well, me being only 2 hours from Ottawa, once I was towards the end of my career. So once those guys made it to Ottawa, I started going up and watching them. So then obviously I'm a fan because they're all my friends. And then so everybody just took it that I was never going to cheer for the Leafs, and I just said I'm cheering for my buddies. So I guess now I'm an Ottawa Senators fan, and I've kept up with it. So it's good for the back and forth with the boys here.
Good for you. It's almost like a second NHL draft for you, I think, because you ended up getting picked by Florida in the '93 expansion draft, didn't you?
I did. Pretty exciting for about 1 day. They picked me. I'd gotten traded to Winnipeg, and I was exposed and got picked. And I was the fourth defenseman picked. And then a day later, I got a call from Bobby Clarke, and back then the contracts were a little bit different. You would have a year and like if you had signed a 2-year deal, you'd have an option year on it. So I played out my option the year before, and then Bobby Clarke called me and said, "Yep, we're gonna offer you your termination contract, which is your last year." And I said, "Well, I already played that out last year." And he said, "Really?" So they picked me not knowing that I didn't have another year in my contract. So they ended up not offering me a contract, so it made me a free agent. So
Okay.
kind of a great. I was thinking things were looking up pretty good because I had a really good year in the I started in the IHL, then went to the HL, and I had like 60 points. So I had a really good year. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm getting a chance here. So they pulled the rug out pretty quick.
I would have thought that would be your feeling, right? With the expansion team, here's your opportunity. But I got to say, perseverance is what comes to mind for me when I look at your resume, Steve, because you didn't give up. Eventually, you get that game with the Chicago Blackhawks, and it's almost 10 years between that and your next NHL appearance with the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like even when I got called up, the reporters asked me questions. Oh, 10 years apart, and how'd you keep going? And I just looked at them and I said, I grew up when I wanted to be a hockey player, and when obviously everybody wants to play in the NHL, I said, but I'm living my dream of being a hockey player. I don't play in the NHL on a regular basis, but up to that point, I said I've played in the NHL. So not many people can say that. I said, so am I happy? No, but am I over the course of the whole career to get to play those 5 more games meant a lot to me. But the fact that it was 10 years apart, I played pro hockey for 16 years, and I saw a lot of great spots. I was in some real crap holes. Don't get me wrong. Traveled a lot of buses, a lot of plane rides, a lot of time across North America. A year in Augsburg, Germany during the 04 lockout. So hockey opened up a lot of doors for me, even in my life now. Like I'm a local guy, but a lot of people still say you're the guy you played for the Bulls, even though the Bulls have been gone for I think 6, 7 years now.
Did you have a favorite spot along the way out of all of those destinations? I think I counted 16 different teams overall.
Well, it's over 20, but some of them I went back to a couple times.
Right.
So whether they count or not, and then the one year was in Kentucky, which I had my best year individual wise, had 73 points and got first team All Star. My son was born there. Providence in 1999, we had a wicked team, won the Calder Cup championship. My daughter was born there, so a couple of cities that we'll always remember. But kind of hard to say that Vegas wouldn't playing in Las Vegas in the IHL wouldn't rank up there. Wicked town. It wasn't even the gambling and everything because you get sick of that, but being able to go out, wear your shorts to the rink, go golfing after, whatever. But like I say, there was somewhere better than others. Spent a lot of time out in the East Coast of Canada too, so they take the good with the bad.
That Calder Cup in 99. I mean, you guys basically cruised in that when you talked about how good a team you had with Providence, but you were never even really tested in the playoffs, at least not looking at the results of those series. And you cruise over Rochester 4-1 in the final.
Well, funny enough, I got loaned there. I was with Calgary, and I'd said my wife was pregnant, and I said I didn't want to go back to St. John's for the next year. So they sent me back to St. John's, and Rick Five is the coach, and he says I'm going to name you captain. I said don't do that. I said I don't want to be here. I'm trying to get out of here. So he named me the captain. Ended up playing the first 5 games there, and then finally they worked out a deal and loaned me to Providence. I'm like, Providence? I've never even been there before. I wasn't even in the American League when I was there last time. So I looked at the record the year before, and they won 18 games. And I'm like, oh my, this is not good. And the coach at the time was Peter Laviolette. So he called me, and Bill Armstrong. He was the assistant, but he was actually still playing at the time. So Laviolette called me, and we made a deal for you. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't a good deal. I said, I don't think I'm too interested in coming there. And he said, well, we got a real up and coming team. They were 2-4 when I got there. And I'm like, this is not going to be a good year for me. And then we ended up winning. We were 2-4 to start the season. And then we ended up only losing 10 games the whole year. I think it was 10 games and plus the playoffs. So we kind of walked through from that point on, had our own issues going into the playoffs. The Rangers, we met them in the first round, and the Rangers didn't make the playoffs that year. So their team was in Hartford. They sent like 5 or 6 guys down. So on paper, they had a way better team than us. And we were down 3-0 in the first period. And we were thinking, oh my, this isn't going to be good. We came back and won that game and then swept. So again, it's not always the best players, it's the best team. And we had a wicked bunch of guys. End up there was 3 guys on the first team All-Star, another guy on the second team, but we had the best. I believe we definitely had the most goals, best power play, one of the best goals against. So we kind of rolled through, but you never roll through. We won 4-1 in the finals against Rochester, but they were stacked up pretty well too. Game 3, I guess. I bent over to tie my skates and slipped my back out. So I tried to play another game, but I was pretty much done for the rest of the year. So pretty dangerous tying your skates sometimes.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew? Your hockey DB page, Steve, has got to be like one of the fullest pages anybody will find. Is there some kind of record that you tried to set, or you might have it in terms of the amount of travel there?
I think if you look up Jared Scaldi, he's going to be right up there too. He might even have me, to tell you the truth. So no, it wasn't anything. It was like some years it didn't matter whether I was the one year I got moved 3 times, and I got loaned at the start of the year. Then I got traded at the deadline, and then I got traded 2 weeks after the deadline. Rick Dudley, I was in Detroit in the IHL, and he made a deadline deal for me, like the day of the deadline. And then I was there for 2 weeks. And then he called me and says, "Yeah, we traded you to St. John's, Newfoundland for Dixon Ward." And I was like, "Well, how did you do that? The trade deadline was 2 weeks ago." And he says, "Oh, we just loaned you, so that's okay." And I'm like, "Oh my, oh well, off to Newfoundland, right?" So I went wherever they take me, and sometimes your contract to be up, you go that way. I was lucky as I got older, and my wife and the kids came along. We weren't really getting moved in the middle of the year; it was more at the start of the year. So
I'm thinking back on what you said before when reporters would ask you, the time it took between stints in the National Hockey League, for example. Your dream was to be a pro hockey player. You were playing pro hockey. It wasn't always the NHL. You got 6 of those games, but you were playing pro hockey. I got to think, Steve, you must have just loved it. Otherwise, I'm sure you would have given up somewhere along the line.
that's how I knew towards the end. I was 36 when it was time to quit. I've had 2 hip replacements already at 53 years old, so I was in pain all the time, and hockey wasn't fun for me that last year. I had a lot of fun playing, but I said I was in pain a lot, and so once it stops being fun, that's why guys retire, and that's why some guys retire earlier. I still had fun. I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed being around. I met a lot of amazing players, coaching staffs, trainers, everybody. So when it stopped becoming fun, that's when I knew it was over. So that took me till I was 36 years old. So I had to retire and get a real job at that point.
I noticed you've got some jerseys behind you in the background. Do you have all of them and you just rotate through, or how do you determine which ones get the shadow box treatment?
No, actually, the one you're looking at behind me there, that's my one from my last year. That was my 1,000th game. So they had that put in a box for me. The other one would be my son's. He played in the OJHL, and he's down at Cornell now. So that was his. He was the MVP of the league that year. So they boxed that up for him. So I got a few more around. I don't have them all. I wish to say I did have them all. I've got likely 12 or so. So I'm missing a few for sure. Even my draft jersey, it was stashed at my parents for years. They had a fire in 2006 and lost everything. So unfortunately, my draft jersey was in there too, along with my Belleville Bulls jersey. So that one's been replaced, and I gave the Belleville Bulls jersey and my San Jose jersey down to the for the Hall of Fame induction. So they get that for a year, anyways.
You talked earlier about, unfortunately, that first NHL game comes at the expense of your friend, Brian Marchman, who was benched, and you get to play. What was it like, though? With that Chicago team, looking at the roster with the Ronix and the Goulets and a whole bunch of others, what was it like stepping onto the NHL ice that first game?
Pretty good when Dominic Hasek is your backup goalie, right?
Backup goalie, exactly.
Backup goalie. Balfour was one of the best goalies in the league at that time. Yeah, star-studded for sure. Chelios, just watching him, Steve Smith, some of those like Jeremy Rowan, all those guys, right? So it was played in Boston Garden. So again, I'd gotten traded from Boston the year before. And so to go back there, and I told this story earlier, was Ray Bork in the Boston uh, training camp the year before was my roommate. So obviously Ray Bork doesn't have to come to the hotel. He just goes home every night. So he'd come in and say, "Hey kid, did they check curfew on me last night?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, no, you're good. I think you're all right." So it was the next year. And he obviously remembered me because it was just a little bit of a double take on the ice when I skated out there. He wouldn't remember this, but obviously I do because I remember the double take. So little thing like that. I didn't play a lot. I think I maybe played 6 or 7 minutes. Pretty sure we lost. But again, I got sent down the next day or 2 days later. So it was my start, and I thought, okay, well, I think I was 22, going on 23. So I thought, okay, I'll be able to get more games in for sure. So unfortunately, it took 10 more years.
Yeah, but not a bad lineup there either with Nolan and Ricci and Marlowe and Damphus and the San Jose Sharks that year.
Yeah, they had a wicked team, and it's kind of bittersweet they didn't go further, tell you the truth, because they did have some really good teams, and they were so close but just couldn't get over that final hump. So yeah, lots of great guys. Like Danfus was in Toronto when I was when we'd first got drafted too, right? So there's a few guys that I played with over the years there too, and then obviously with Thordy and Mush there, they made things really easy.
Brian Sutter was the thread that connected both of those appearances in the NHL for you. He was coaching both Chicago and San Jose. Did you have a special connection to him, or did it just work out that way?
It just worked out that way. He was never and never has been somebody that wanted to see young players in his lineup. So I think he was forced to play somebody else for my first game. And then as I got, when I was in San Jose, somebody got hurt and it was kind of me or nobody else to play. So I wouldn't say that he had a soft spot for me, but just right place, right time. Even my last year, he was the coach in Calgary when I was when I was there, and he had a lot to say because the lockout year they were trying to get a contract, and he says we can't sign you this year, but next year we'll sign you if you're available when you come back. So true to his word, he ended up signing me the next year, and I said, hey, good to see you again. But it was just for training camp, right? So, but yeah, it's obviously the landscape has changed in the coaching world a lot, so it's kind of wore thin on a few of his players. So it is what it is.
Well, speaking of coaching, and you made reference to this earlier, you did stay involved in the game, at least to some degree, coaching with the Quinty Red Devils for a bit. What were you like as a coach? Did you take anything away from guys that had coached you?
For sure, I did. And I was assistant coach for the first few years, and I really, again, I wanted to sit back and watch. But I guess when you have something to offer, unless there's somebody else there that you think could do a job. So Randy Ewan's a guy that his son playing in the American League now. He asked me to come down. It's about half an hour drive to go down for AAA. So I went down, and I think after the kids were in minor bantam, he was supposed to coach again the next year, and we got beat out the first round. And he walked out of the dressing room and says, "Yep, I'm stepping down. You're going to be the new coach." And I said, "Do you think you should ask me?" Or so I ended up being the head coach for major bantam and minor midget. So obviously, minor midget's a big year. So we ended up having 10 kids drafted to the OHL. A couple are playing pro now. A couple are still in university. I think four of them played in the OHL. So like I say it's nice to see the kids go on, and the I tried to run things as much as they were going to see if they wanted to go forward in hockey. Here's how a practice is going to be run. Everything's up tempo. Here's how a game should look. Here's the accountability that you're going to find the next rung up the ladder.
What's the most important thing for you as a coach, Steve, in a player that would indicate to you that, yep, he might have what it takes to go to the next level?
Well, I guess the drive and determination is a big thing. Not everybody's going to be physical. Not everybody's going to be skilled, but you got to be able to battle and compete. Even if you're not that physical guy, you still need to be able to go first in the corner and come out with the puck. They're puck battles. When the scouts are watching those guys, they track these, they call them 50-50 pucks, right? So if you're on the good side of those 50-50 battles, then they take notice, right? If you're losing battles, that means you're not doing what you need to make your team better, right? So what I'd always instill with them too is body language. Body language is huge, and it's one thing that sticks out to everybody in the whole crowd. Some kids shaking their head, or their head nod goes up after they don't get the puck. That's like a non-starter for most scouts. They just click you right off the list, right?
You mentioned your son earlier, Dalton, playing D1 at Cornell. NCAA route for the son of a former OHLer. Is that a little bit weird?
No, not at all. He was. You there?
I'm here. I can still
I
see
lose
you and
you.
hear you. You know, I can. Are you still there? Oh,
Oh, I got you.
there you are.
Yeah, no, not at all. His path was totally different. He got drafted late, a little bit of a late bloomer, or not a little bit, but at the draft, he had more than a point a game in his AAA, and we had a good team, so we had a bunch of kids getting drafted, and he just fell off. He wasn't a real strong skater. He got drafted 11th round to Saginaw. Went to a couple training camps. They weren't ready to do anything. Ended up going to a camp in Guelph, ended up going to a camp in Oshawa, but he wasn't ready to compete. And when he got drafted, he was 6 foot or 6'1", 170 pounds, but still one of a bigger kid in the draft. Well, a year later, he was 6'3", 215, and then we went back and they were like, "What the heck's he been eating?" And again, it wasn't until he committed to get into the right shape, conditioning wise, and the frame of mind till he was 19, and then he just come back and said, "This is what I want to do," and then decided to work out like crazy the one summer, and then he was the league MVP in the OJ the next year. So that got his commitment, and again, he lost a year during COVID, so that didn't help things either. But yeah, classic late bloomer. It wasn't like if a team come and said, "Yeah, we want to sign you," we would have thought about it. We didn't think all along he was going to the college ranks, but it worked out, and it's a totally different animal down there for sure.
Worst places to be though than Cornell. Good program there.
Wicked, and it's 4 hours for us door to door. The coach has been there for 28 years now, I think it is. And yes, obviously an Ivy League school. They go in, they take their schooling very serious, and to just if you went to Cornell, it's amazing the connections that are around the whole world. So he's going to have that at his fingertips when he's done.
How did you find that part of the game when you were playing, Steve, the student athlete in the Ontario Hockey League? It's, from my perspective, watching the kids, it's a heck of a balancing act.
It is for sure. And again, the practices, especially when you're on the road, there are always going to be some teachers and guidance counselors that are going to have to guide them along the way. I can't say that it was as important back when I was going through. I went through grade 13, but my grade 12 and grade 13 years, I only took a couple classes a semester, so I wasn't overloaded by any means. But yes, it's definitely a really good friend of mine. His kid is from Madoc, Ben Danford, plays in Oshawa. He was his mother's a teacher. He got the Oshawa Scholastic player with one of the other kids. So again, it's a commitment, is what it is. Some kids are gonna thrive with it. Other kids are gonna struggle with it. But like I say, the OHL has really switched gears there to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to succeed in school, right? And now that they've all got the opportunity, if pro isn't on the horizon, they have the opportunity to go to school and continue their education and keep playing hockey, which is awesome.
Draft year for Danford, big year for the family.
Yes, for sure. Well, I just got back from the U18s overseas, which was wicked. We watched the games here, so yeah, looking for big things from them for sure.
Even though you weren't sure about the pressure of playing for essentially your hometown as a kid, Steve. It must have been pretty cool to be a Belleville area boy playing for the Bulls. I mean, you must have owned the town for a few years, didn't you?
We spent a lot of time down there for sure. Again, I live in a town of 1,300 people. It's 25 minutes from Belleville, so I was down there all the time. We'd go down there for our workouts. We'd go down there for our fun. So no, it's looking back, it's the best thing that could have happened to me. I'd moved home away when I was 16 to play junior B. So then I didn't live at home when I played for the Bulls. So I still lived down in Belleville, but I saw my parents weekly. And so to look back, it's the best thing that could have happened to me.
We are having this conversation just days after you were inducted into the Belleville Sports Hall of Fame. What does that mean to you when you say with that Steve Bancroft, Hall of Fame inductee?
Yeah, pretty special. Like I say, obviously not being from Belleville, but being a local guy. There's a lot of pictures up on that wall. My billet, who I live with the Bulls for 3 years, he's on that wall. Some of my teachers from even back north, they're on that wall. My aunt or my wife's uncle's on the wall. Rob Ray, Matt Cook, all guys like that came through. All the Crawfords, obviously a great history with them around the Belleville area. So yeah, to have my name or have my picture up there, it's pretty special for sure.
What was the ceremony like for you? What was it like going back and reliving some of those memories?
Well, I had to do a speech, and they said you got 5 minutes. So when I was done, my wife said you were 8.5 minutes. I didn't feel so bad because some of the other ones were longer, but I just did some bullet points, and I said I can BS, I guess, just make sure I don't forget anybody. The main thing, and no, great ceremony. A lot of people, like even from back in the Bulls days, um, that hadn't seen in forever, recognized the faces, but just haven't seen them. So did my speech. I survived, and I didn't take too long on stage, which was good. Jack Miller was the host, so obviously got a long history with Jack Miller too.
He is a heck of a guy. And really, I mean, from OHL Game of the Week to the longtime association with the Belleville Bulls. But I think the Ontario Hockey League owes him a debt of gratitude for his work in it.
Yes, the old game of the week, Saturday game of the week, right? Longine Wittenhauer, player of the game, and get your brute pack if you got to play of the game, right? Player of the game, right? They're a watch for play of the game, I guess. So yeah, so that goes back a long time for sure. And Jack, obviously, he's on the radio here too, doing the news. I said to him, I said, geez, you must be getting ready to retire. And I don't think he's quite ready to head out to pasture yet. So we'll have him around for a while yet.
I look forward to that. I'll be honest with you, Banger. I texted Jack before you and I got together here just to say, hey, anything I should know about Steve Bancroft before I sit down with him. So he's keeping tabs on you too, buddy.
Good to hear.
You joked earlier that when it came time to retire from hockey, you had to get a real job. Is that when is real estate the real job?
Yes. So obviously playing in the minors with kids, I had to have an eye towards making a living, right? So I'm not playing the NHL for 16 years, battled it out and made some good money along the way. But again, I had to have a game plan. My dad was in real estate, very successful, and he'd been kind of bugging me for years. So I actually took all my courses while I was still playing. So I retired, and a week later I was working. So kind of hit the ground running. Had a foot in the door for sure because realtors can take a while to get going, but I had a clientele kind of waiting for me, and no, I couldn't ask for anything more for sure.
Okay, now I know how you carved out a 16-year pro career with a work ethic like that. Come on, take at least the summer of Steve or something before you start, eh?
Well, it's funny. My first week, Friday would Friday come, and I said, "Okay, we'll see you later. See you Monday or whatever." And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I says, "Well, you can work on the weekends." And I was like, geez, weekends are for fun. So I learned it pretty quick. His work ethic, he worked a lot of long hours, but that's why he was so successful. And that's kind of what it was. My career in real estate was molded after him.
I look at that part of the province, Steve, very fondly. east of the Toronto area, and I've looked at some of your listings, so now I know who I can reach out to when it's. I'll probably retire before Jack Miller does, the way I'm going.
Yeah, we got it all up here. We got water, lots of lakes up near us, lots of farm, lots of hunting areas, and only 25 minutes to Belleville. So I'm down there selling too. So got a pretty broad area, but rather be out driving around the back roads than sitting at the office anyways.
I believe that for sure. How much do your hockey connections help, or even the way you built relationships through the game over all those years help you in your career in real estate?
Well, there's a few hockey players back here. I got a call, was about 3 years ago, and you'll know this name, Dale DeGray.
A
And
digger.
he had some, he actually lives on he's getting ready to move up to the lake I live on. And so I had some listings there, and he left a message. And so when I called, he said, I'm not sure whether you remember me or not. And I said, of course I do. So how can I help? He ended up buying a lot up on our lake, and he's built a house up here. He hasn't moved up yet, but so like just funny things like that. And I get a lot of people, like I have a little blurb on that I played pro hockey, and nothing too major, but a lot of people will read up on me before they call. Okay, where'd you play hockey? Oh, you got drafted by the Leafs, really? So it's a conversation starter for sure. I don't necessarily lead off that I was a hockey player, but they say, "Oh, you're the hockey player." I said, "No, I'm the real estate guy that used to be a hockey player."
When a guy like Dale DeGray calls and says, "You probably don't remember me," and you're like, "Oh yeah, I do," fondly or not so fondly?
Yeah, I would have played against him in the eye, and now he's obviously in Owen Sound. Good friend of mine, Greg Walters, is the coach there now. So lots of connections still in the league, which is some of our kids of all the guys we played against. Now they're coming through the OHL. So nice to see.
I like the looks of that attack team this year. They're kind of my sleeper in the Western Conference. There'll be some other tough teams, but I like Owen Sound. Do you still keep tabs on Major Junior, even though you don't have a team in the immediate area?
Not as much if it was local, yes, but it's more to keep track of uh, the kids that I know their fathers and stuff, or local kids that are playing. That's more so. I don't necessarily keep track of all the standings. There's a lot of people that I run into, like James Boyd. Run into him not all the time, but ran into a couple times in Kingston. I've ran into him in Belleville before. You just never know. We've got some same friends. So there's guys around the league that I'll run into periodically. So, like I say, I don't follow it that I'm right on top of it. I'm more watching the NCAA right now, so it's the time is divided, I guess.
We talk about 6 degrees of separation a lot. With your career and the number of stops that you've had, it's probably 2 or 3 degrees of separation. You got to know somebody that you either played with or were related to somehow.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere, and even now, I'll be down at Cornell, and I'll be looking around on the other, see who's on the other team. Because if there's any kids that I recognize their name, then their dads are not going to be far behind. And I've ran into numerous guys at these games, and then plus the scouts that are in these stands. I know whether it's half or less than half, whatever, of the guys that are actually scouting. So it's awesome to catch up with those guys. We may look a little bit different, maybe a little heavier, a little less hair, but we still always it's always nice to connect for sure.
I'll tell you what, your stories are a ton of fun. This has been great. Congratulations again on the induction into the Belleville Sports Hall of Fame, Steve, and thanks so much for making time for our show.
No, I'm more than happy. That's awesome. Thanks for the invite. I really enjoyed it.